So here we are. The Cosby sentencing is here. But perhaps the most amazing thing about this whole thing is that the American people have no idea just how important, meaningful, and historical this case is to American history and the trajectory and future of the American justice system. This moment means so much more than the media is showing you. This is going to go through an appeal process, and whatever happens with this case is going to reverberate throughout American history for a long time to come. This is one of the first cases in American history in which the media and outside groups and movements actually became more powerful than legal protocol, even to the point that it completely obliterated constitutional rights. This is a classic case in which the powers that be used the ignorance and emotion of the people to completely override the justice system. Bill Cosby's conviction, sustained or overturned, is going to tell you exactly where we are as a nation. Watch. Let's talk about what our dangerous, agenda-ridden media is still carefully keeping out of discussion. This is the most corrupt celebrity case in U.S. history. He was condemned because of popular opinion, and this is a case where everyone believes Bill Cosby is guilty solely because of the mainstream media's lies and spin. In reality, here's what really happened in the case. 3 of the 5 women, including Constant, gave good reasons why they should not be believed. The most famous of the women pretty much admitted that she was lying when Tom Mesereau masterfully tripped her up. And the main accuser had nearly over 11 inconsistent statements. And every time she got caught, she'd just simply say, "Oh, I was mistaken." So the main witness was not even a credible witness. That alone should have tossed this case. And this is aside from the fact that the other women didn't even belong there. You can't just bring in women to make claims against an accused person because it's not fact, it's hearsay. It's supposed to be inadmissible. But that is just one of many, many, many other questionable things that both judge and DA did to rig the case. So if this doesn't get looked into and corrected, yes, there is a big problem for the constitutional rights of everybody. This was just a media circus and one of the most disgusting cases in U.S. history. So much so that it has lots of lawyers talking. International lawyer John Davis says this: the Cosby jury verdict is being heralded as a great milestone in justice for women accusers. But the problem is that the judge in the case rigged the trial to ensure that Cosby would be convicted. Davis compared this to Jim Crow era sentencing. Lots of lawyers who deal with these cases on a regular basis are starting to weigh in because they see the huge problem. Attorney Paul Saputo of the Saputo law firm in Dallas said, "I honestly don't know whether or not Cosby is guilty of what he's accused of, but when the justice system sacrifices fairness and procedure to tilt the scales, we have a major problem." Not only did Cosby's accuser receive a large amount of support from the government and media, Cosby became a victim of the mass media and popular culture who won't give him a second thought. What happened to Bill Cosby through the media and now the courts is no milestone for women. And if you think so, I'm sorry. You're caught up in this matrix and very misguided. The international lawyer John Davis likens the situation to a modern-day lynching. Davis goes on to suggest that we're in a perversion of gynocentrism, in which a mere accusation destroys a man. This is happening to a lot of men, but most viciously and extreme to Bill Cosby. Davis goes on to address something topically that really needs to be addressed. This new just believe the women culture is not rooted in reality and is extremely dangerous because there is a mind-blowing amount of false accusation cases that led to convictions from here to the UK that had to be overturned. Many advocacy groups are basically peddling false statistics. The promoted belief that women never lie about rape was itself a dangerous lie. Yes, it is true that there were lots of obstacles for many women when it came to reporting rape, from fear of people knowing, to fear of retribution of some kind, all the way down to fear of being called a liar or not being believed. We know this. Yes, that is real. But now what they've done is created the false belief that this is what happens every time and in every case. That's not true. There's never just one myopic narrative. The truth is, in most cases, if you accuse a man of rape, the police are going to go after him, and it's going to be investigated. And yes, there are many cases of false accusations and convictions that needed to be overturned. According to real statistics, here are the most common reasons for the steady number for false accusation. And this is in no order of importance. One main one is to hide infidelity or a sexual act from a spouse, significant other, or a parent, when it's clear that the act took place. Another reason is sympathy. In many cases, it's been determined that the motive was to garner sympathy from family, a spouse, or loved ones. Another is regret or revenge. In many cases, a woman consensually went along with the sex act, but immediately or eventually regretted it and began to psychologically recall the situation as rape. And in many instances, after they told people it was rape, the friend or loved one pushed them to report it. Or after the act, they began to realize the guy is someone they really don't like, or he wasn't a gentleman, or he's an a-hole. And so they reconciled the act in their mind as rape, as deliberated revenge, or the subconscious and psychological removal of consent retroactively. And perhaps the most commonly known is for money. Obviously, lots of false accusation cases for financial reward. So again, no one's making the claim that this is the norm, but this is just as real. And the data gets even worse when you factor in false accusation against black males, black athletes, and celebrities. Now, this is not made up stuff here. This is real. And if you mention all this to people, not to denigrate women, but just to remind people to be a little objective and that no, you can't just believe women because that's very ignorant and irresponsible. You're probably going to be attacked. And yes, there is something very wrong with that. Because we're living in a time in which people are badly propagandized with provably false information and statistics. Advocacy groups are sharing research that they funded, and it's provably inaccurate. And when it comes to the case of Bill Cosby, right in line with all this, people are just going to sit back and listen to what the TV tells them. And this is why we're here now. Now let's talk about why this case is so very important that the media is not telling us. I'm going to talk about why this case is so important to the country and society, and how it eventually became so important to me and my platform. I'll take it way back. Back in the day, I was working as a professional musician and songwriter, and part-time as a writer, and a lot of creative types tend to get into different things and juggle different hustles. And that's exactly what I did. And eventually, I went from writing to blogging. Writing was always a need for me as a creative outlet. At a certain time in my life, I started to wake up. And when I was waking up, I didn't really care about being popular and things like that. Writing was just a creative outlet that I always wanted to have. And I always did, whether it was lucrative or not. And then something happened very unexpectedly. A lot of my blogs started to go viral. A lot of the subjects I covered were controversial, and some of my vlogs made it to #1 in the Google search. I know it sounds like I'm bragging, but I'm not. It's relevant to the story. I was excited because of what it meant. It meant I was able to connect, maybe help raise the vibration, and maybe talk about issues that usually go ignored. I was excited because my point of view and message was able to resonate. And one of the ones that did very well was one I did on Michael Jackson, proving his innocence and basically showing what the media was doing. And because that one was able to get around, someone was able to see it, was impressed with the research, and now it's going to be featured in a book. Whenever that's finalized, of course, I'll try to make that information available. The original blog is no longer there, but I transferred it somewhere else. And the new blog didn't go viral, but did pretty good numbers all over again, because the media wasn't telling anybody any of that. Long story short, that blog site got sabotaged. I'm not going to tell you the blog name. I'm not going to go into what happened. But that was before, when I didn't think anyone would intentionally try to kill my momentum. I was younger, greener, and more naive. And I just thought, well, you know, stuff happens. But to be honest, the wind was completely knocked out of me. I had a following, and now I had nothing. I was even making some money, and it was all gone. Had to start from scratch. So I started to look at other things and other platforms. So I just started another blog on my own domain this time. And I started to flirt with YouTube in around 2014. this was the same time the Cosby rumors started to emerge. But it was in that experience covering the Michael Jackson trial that I learned a lot of things. And with the Cosby allegations, my spider sense was going off like crazy. I'll explain why. What I learned from the Michael Jackson situation was mind-blowing. What I already knew about mainstream media was just confirmed with something that I could research and prove right in front of my face. The media lies. And not always lie like flat out lie, but it's how they frame the story sometimes and what they omit deliberately. They deliberately put things out there that are provably not true just to make it appear as though someone is guilty. And they did that to Michael Jackson time and time again. And that's why my blog went viral, because I pointed it out. They want to make this man look guilty. That was what they did, and that was their angle. They weren't reporting news. Journalists like Aphrodite Jones wrote about it. They were trying to lynch Michael Jackson. All the things still floating out there till this day is lies and distortions of the truth. And I realized back then, man, I need to throw my energy into this. This needs to be fought. Real journalists doing real journalism needs to exist in this world, because this is dangerous. These demonic entities are just running away with telling people whatever they want to tell you, and people just believe it. Most people, they're not going to research, they're not going to do anything, they're just going to sit there and listen to what corrupt media is telling them. And the media knows that. So I'm gonna come back to this point in time right here when I just started posting about Bill Cosby. But first, I'll give you another example of how the media sometimes operates. This was something that I was gonna cover a while ago, but Adam Ruins Everything ruined my vlog, beat me to the punch, and he did an excellent job. They make some very good videos and explain things really well. I'll leave a link to the one I'm referencing, because it once again exposes exactly how mainstream media in bed with corporate interests operate. You all may remember the story about the frivolous lawsuits. One in particular, someone sued McDonald's because they spilled coffee on themselves. That story was dragged all through the media and lampooned for months.
It seems she was holding a cup between her legs while driving.
Now she claims she broke her nose on the sneeze guard at the Sizzler, bending over looking at the chickpeas.
You get me one coffee drinker on that jury, you gonna walk out of there a rich man.
Mainstream media, Hollywood, and the powers that be had everyone laughing at this woman. And everyone was on the same page with what happened. Only none of that was true, and we learned later what really happened. It was all exposed in court. That was the furthest thing from a frivolous lawsuit. In reality, what happened was, through the years, McDonald's was receiving plenty of complaints that their coffee was way too hot. It was burning people. And they were, in fact, serving their coffee damn near boiling. And they chose to do nothing about any of the complaints. Finally, this little old lady got a McDonald's coffee, and she admits she spilled it on herself, but it spilled in her groin area. And because the coffee was that insanely hot, the burns were so bad and severe, she had to be hospitalized. She was disfigured. It was very serious. So then she reached out to McDonald's because she only wanted her medical bills covered. They flat out said no, they did nothing. Her medical bills were about $20,000. To literally add insult to injury, they offered her $800, so she had to sue. So that's where all this corporate media-driven propaganda came from, with the comedians and the celebrities making fun of her. Corporate entities spearheaded all of that. And almost immediately after, while all the media propaganda was nice and ripe, George W. Bush kept signing things into action, which eventually led to the Frivolous Lawsuit Prevention Act of 2009. And so, all of this was done through the media to help corporations avoid having to pay out lawsuits in situations where they may very well be culpable. Regardless, after all that media indoctrination, here's what really happened in court that they didn't want anyone to know. The court did find McDonald's culpable and negligent, and so they awarded Stella Liebeck $200,000 in compensatory damages. And because McDonald's handled this so disgracefully, they also awarded her $2.7 million in punitive damages. And now you see how this works. Many times corporate media doesn't report news. It shapes public opinion because sometimes entities on high have an end game in mind. So bringing this back, following this pattern, they did the same thing to Michael Jackson. Powerful entities wanted people to believe he was guilty. So they edited all the information to make it appear as though he was guilty. The comedians and the pundits made fun of him, and most people thought he was guilty. Until court time, like Stella Liebeck, getting her vindication from a confused and misled public. Many of MJ's accusers behind the scenes were completely exposed as frauds. And just like Cosby, the DA of that case, Tom Sneddon, was corrupt, doing all sorts of unlawful things to try to force a conviction. The media just didn't tell you that. A lot of the information that is still out there to this day is provably false information. That every few years you still see them trying to breathe life into it because they're disgusting and they're just going to keep following this agenda. Because it is an agenda. Oh, they're still working on it. Regardless, MJ was vindicated and he walked away free on all counts. So the lesson here and the point I'm trying to get at is this. Corporate mainstream media is often compromised and fulfilling agendas, not reporting news. And so, what you see and hear on TV and reality often are two completely different things. And every day, all the time, people are walking around brainwashed with an angle and don't even realize it. And now here we are with Bill Cosby. And now let me get back to where I was and how I got started with this. It was around 2014 and you could see a pattern. The media was quick, too fast and vicious, and seemingly one-sided. They weren't really reporting news. They were building a case of guilt. Soon after that, they were just pouring out these accusers right onto mainstream TV, one after the other. And there was just a problem with that I couldn't immediately verbalize. And I wasn't really there to say, oh, he's innocent. That's not what I do. And as soon as you try to be publicly objective, as most people should be, all these intellectually dead people controlled by media will keep thinking there's something wrong with you, not them. They won't listen or challenge what they believe. They'll try to put you in this little box of being a biased fan or something, arrogantly assume there's things that you don't know or understand, and assume the moral high ground. They won't be able to stick to the evidence of this case. They might bring up OJ or rape statistics, repeat media talking points that aren't true like he admitted it, or insist that the amount of women coming forward means guilt, even though that's not true, and considering that Gloria Allred put most of them out there to bolster the case. It's one of the hardest things imaginable to break programming or stop people from trying to question your motives when you're trying to expose the truth. I have no spin or agenda. I have an allegiance to the truth, and I'm bothered when I see something that isn't right. It doesn't matter what I believe personally, because I did not rule out that he could have done it. It's just that I know things need to happen a certain way, and what the media was doing was not right. And I'm experienced enough to know not to trust the media blindly, like most people did so easily. I began to realize that we were witnessing something a little different and new, almost as though they improved on their usual psychotic strategies that they employ all the time. It seemed as though someone very high on the totem pole wanted us all to believe. Undoubtedly, Bill Cosby was a serial rapist, and the media was used as the mechanism through which to program that. Not inform you, but to shape your opinion. So back in 2014, when the smear campaign was about to peak, there were very few mainstream platforms supporting Bill Cosby. Innocence until proven guilt or due process. I saw only a handful like documentarian Tariq Nasheed, but I knew mainstream media was going to blow these people off and discredit them as race baiters. And I also believe that most people were probably afraid to be objective in public because Cosby supporters were being attacked and people were called names and rape apologists. Whoopi Goldberg, Felicia Rashad, everyone was getting smacked down. So nobody wanted to fight this battle. So there was almost no one in the mainstream media just being even keel. Most platforms were heavily anti-Cosby and everybody was dropping like flies. And then I saw that all too familiar pattern. Other celebrities, the comedians, the pundits, everyone was going in on him as if he was already pronounced guilty. And still with no trial or the realization that a lot of these stories are more likely not true than true due to their own holes. The memes popped up, the jokes. This demonic system was having a high point of debauchery. with nobody pulling the reins on what was going on. This was a modern-day lynching. More people were dropping like flies, stabbing him in the back, and then you notice this weird reoccurring thing where a lot of celebrities, especially black ones or people who have worked with him, were being egged on or invited or encouraged to make a negative Cosby statement. It was a lot like the Michael Jackson situation. There was no fair and balanced reporting. They never showed you what was wrong with a lot of the allegations. Just more and more laying it on thick, even to the extent of implying that he admitted to drugging women when taken out of context. That is not what he said in the deposition. And so, connected to that energy greater than myself, I wanted and needed to address this. So right about the end of 2014, I probably wasn't the first or the only, but I was in that first wave, able to articulate a defense for Bill Cosby, just based on the facts, evidence, and research, strong enough for it to start to make waves in such a heavily anti-Cosby environment. So after months of research and compiling information, the second blog that I wrote about Bill Cosby and the allegations went viral. And not too long after that, I started to do the YouTube thing, and then those videos began to go viral. Obviously, nobody knew anything or cared about me. It was the information, and I had the feeling that people were starting to listen. Then around 2016, there was a lot more of us, and it seemed like people were starting to think. Not so much in the mainstream, but definitely in the blogosphere and blogosphere. The information is everywhere, and now there's lots of people trying to pump out the truth. But I noticed a response to this, and how they beefed up their efforts to keep the brainwashing intact. So even though there was a lot more people now doing good work, bringing out facts and receipts, mainstream media doubled down, algorithms changed, so many things happened. I feel there was an overall attack and censorship on all topics. And now it kind of feels like me and others who are fighting this are kind of preaching to the choir now. And we're deliberately being drowned out by mainstream media and bigger platforms. And there are so many sneaky ways they do it too. For example, there's a lot of smaller independent channels that appear to be truth channels. But in truth, they still have corporate tentacles running through them, which means they too have assignments, agendas, and controlled information. This is how you know. They know that there's a feeling out there that something might not be right with the Cosby situation. So these channels get out in front of the issue. And some of them even gave Bill Cosby some kind of defense, but still kept the brainwashing and programming intact, suggesting he has a pattern of rape when they're lying and or repeating lies. Many forms of media condition our minds to be intellectually weak, to just accept what we're told and not understand or respect innocence until proven guilt. There is no conclusive pattern that has been established. When not one case was proven beyond a reasonable doubt, and these so-called truth channels for the people ignore the checkered past and all the problematic inconsistencies and holes, that lets you know right there that they are controlled information and they are lying to you too. And now here we are. They've pushed things this far. And this is the worst that I've ever seen in my entire life. Worse than Michael Jackson. What these sick and twisted psychopaths were able to do was dominate the media with propaganda, have everyone in America swear up and down Bill Cosby is a serial rapist, because that's all they put out with their biased reporting. They didn't tell you about any inconsistencies. They didn't tell you about problematic pasts or history of lying, not for the purpose of smearing anyone who may be a victim, but it's relevant when deciding to believe someone without any evidence. And when the media strategically does not tell you these things, that's a form of lying and shaping your opinion. Even though many didn't deserve the benefit of the doubt, the media did the complete opposite. Two specials had them dressed in all white, and we were told not to shame victims, even though no court of law made that determination yet. They did not tell us anything. They just told us there's more women, there's more women, there's more women. So while Bill Cosby was being smeared in the media, this was just as aggressively being pushed into the courtroom. So now we've just witnessed a very historical moment, but historical for all the wrong reasons. We just witnessed and lived through what is perhaps the first modern-day high-tech lynching. Guys, these COINTELPRO agendas are not done. in ways easy for the average layman to point out. They're a lot more clever than that. These things are going to be done through years of social engineering, and they will be done through and with your ignorance and cooperation. Do not for 1 second celebrate the stupid illusion that this is any sort of victory or any semblance of justice. And with that said, what has me more concerned with what they did, because we knew they were going to do this, is how pacified everyone is. This is supposed to be an American outrage. Even if you think him guilty, we've just witnessed a complete bastardization of the so-called justice system. Please do not kid yourself. Out of all these men dragged to light for alleged transgressions, Bill Cosby was the only one lynched and jailed, with perhaps the least amount of evidence. Just the most media smearing and over-dramatization. And hardly anyone in so-called black media has so much as raised an eyebrow. I watched a little bit of coverage, and quite frankly, I couldn't because it made me sick. They're all trying to sanitize and normalize injustice and corruption. And they're tap dancing and acting like it's unfortunate. But it is what it is. No, this is unacceptable. The world is very, very sick. And if you're able to be tricked and emotionally compromised by this, then honestly, you're not ready for anything. Again, we just watched the justice system fail. And in the sick, demonic era, we also get to watch the people who lied and pulled it off grandstand as heroes. Survivors. And unfortunately, the clueless masses are so brain scrambled, socially engineered, and distracted to even know what is going on anyway. I was drawn to this case from day one, and it's never stopped revealing to me how sick society is right now. Let's get back to what happened, that the media will never just tell you. This case originally was dropped because Andrea Conson had lots of credibility issues. It was suspicious, weak, motivated by money, and it didn't belong in court. And so the first DA, Bruce Castor, dismissed it. But the next DA, who had a different idea and political ambition, used the Bill Cosby situation for his personal political career, and used the public perception of Bill Cosby to his personal advantage, and promised to get him, something that you're not supposed to do. He shouldn't have been elected. If this was originally a dropped case in which the accusers were extremely inconsistent, how did they get to keep putting this back into court and then eventually pull off a unanimous guilty verdict when there's obvious reasonable doubt based on very old, weak allegations? Judge O'Neill, whose wife works with sexual assault victims, who on record publicly encouraged people to just believe women, and is rumored to have gotten funding from the Me Too movement, should not have been on the case. He should have recused himself, but he didn't, and continued to make all these ridiculous, suspicious rulings. And in the opinion of experienced lawyers like John Davis, made numerous questionable decisions to force a conviction. Anytime there's reasonable doubt to any degree, there cannot be a guilty verdict. So how did Kevin Steele and Judge O'Neill get an entire 12-person jury to ignore this and still convict him as guilty? Turns out a lot of people internationally would like to know. A petition has been launched by two people who are now friends of mine, attorney Gavin Richard and Nicole of Nicole's View. They, with a group called BillCosbyIsInnocent.com, started this petition to finally have this case investigated. And they just need 1,000 signatures, and I'll leave the link to that petition below. And again, if you really resonate with truth, you should really analyze your response to the existence of this petition. This is not asking for anything but an investigation. And if you're uncomfortable with that, right there, that lets you know what side you're really on. So again, here we are. Bill Cosby's sentencing. Your show of support will send a message. Because I promise you, this case, and whether the conviction is upheld or not, is more important than you think. And no, this is not over.